According to the plan, next year more money will be allocated to economic development, wage increases, housing, and family support. Viktor Orbán, the Prime Minister, is our guest in the studio. Good morning. Good morning. These are the plans for next year, but the current reality, at least the reality of September, is that industrial production has decreased by 5.4%, and the construction industry's performance has dropped by 8.2%. In light of this, what needs to be done to achieve the projected 3.4% growth next year and ensure there is money for the goals mentioned in the introduction?
It is necessary for the war to finally end. It's that simple. The problems of the Hungarian economy, without exception, stem from the war and its consequences. There is the war itself and the poor response to it, which we call sanctions. These sanctions were misguided, thoughtless, and poorly planned by the Union. We did not impose them, so I am not blaming myself here, but rather the Brussels bureaucrats. The sanctions led to an energy crisis, which brought inflation, and across the entire economy, what is needed for success? Predictability, calmness, optimism, belief in development, seeking opportunities for growth, how to become better, was replaced by a defensive posture. Because what would anyone do in a war, if not defend? Businesses thought it was good enough if things didn't get worse, that they didn't lose what they already had, or that their market position didn't deteriorate. The way of thinking changed, and so did the mood regarding future planning. We have been living in this environment for the past 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024. And if we cannot put an end to this, then no matter what measures we try, the soul, the vitality, the hope, the optimism, the planning for the future will not return to the economy. Without this, even if the financial numbers look good or opportunities open up, the economy is run by people, by capital owners, entrepreneurs, and workers who see the value in working harder. If they don't believe in what they're doing, if they are satisfied with what they have and take on a hedgehog-like behavior, and if they see the entire world acting this way, there will be no economic development. So in order to be successful again, we must end the war. Of course, human and Christian perspectives have also led me to say every day for the past 3 years that we must end the war, because after all, thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people are dying, losing their health, and every day thousands of orphans are added to the populations of Ukraine and Russia, with widows suffering blood and sadness everywhere. So this is, of course, the most important argument against the war. But there is another argument, a Hungarian argument, which is that for us, this war is a curse from God when it comes to our pockets, our economy, our income, and our standard of living. That's why it's good if we can end it as soon as possible. I have worked on this, and Hungarian diplomacy has done what it could, with the resources we have, with the power we could muster. We achieved what was possible, and we took on all kinds of risks, sometimes bringing down others' anger on our own heads. But we needed a key player who was strong enough not just to want peace, but also to bring it about. That's why the American election was so important. This connects to the budget because we had to consider the budget in 2 ways, whether there will be a war or not, whether there will be peace or not. For various reasons, I have been pretty sure for a long time, as much as one can be sure in an election, that based on all human calculations, I could be sure that President Trump would return, and that's why we have a very well thought-out peace budget. We also had all the important calculations for the war scenario. I'd rather not even discuss those because I don't want to give Hungarian listeners a heart attack thinking about what 2025 would look like if it were based on the continuation of the war. Instead, we worked out a peace budget, which we submitted, and which will be discussed by the Parliament. And what you quoted from the budget, that there will be strong development, that's something that such a technical language can convey. It's not something people enjoy talking about in a boring way, but the budget is a prosaic genre. You have to speak cautiously here. It's written by financial experts. But in reality, I would have liked to see words like fantastic, great, unprecedented, because in 2025, truly remarkable things will happen in Hungary that have never happened before, and there's no reason not to use the word fantastic to describe them.
We will talk soon about how the war can end, but staying with the budget and the Hungarian situation for now. The war situation, as mentioned earlier, obviously hasn't only left its mark on economies, but also made families, individuals, and businesses more cautious. How can we restore trust among them? And if the war ends, how will the 2025 budget make things better for them?
What I'm trying to explain to everyone is that this budget is the budget of a new economic policy. So we are truly closing a chapter. This difficult, tough survival mode, suffering. Let's just somehow get through this era, and we are opening up perspectives, hope, and opportunities, focusing mainly on the smallest players, that is families, because we are doubling the family tax allowance. On the other hand, we are in serious wage negotiations with employers and trade unions because we want to raise wages, as inflation in recent times has meant price increases. The only help a government can offer people against price hikes is to create the opportunity for them to earn more, because prices become more bearable when people earn more. That's why it's very important that we set a very high, very ambitious multi-year goal to achieve an average income of 1 million forints in Hungary. Housing is the next big package or action plan, a set of measures aimed at making home ownership and housing costs affordable in Hungary. This is why we are trying things that have never been done before. I have great hopes for this. For those under 35, employers can provide housing support up to 150,000 forints a month, meaning that in a year the total amount can reach around 1.8 million forints with favorable terms. This support can be used by employees for rental payments, or if they purchase their own home, for their mortgage payments. This has been something we've been considering for a while now, as we believe we should not go down the route of building state-owned rental housing, because that would bring back the whole public housing culture. Instead, we want to put the private sector in a position where it has an interest in offering housing support to its young employees. I believe this will be a major draw. Companies that can offer such support will have a competitive advantage in the battle for talented young people. In Hungary, there are more jobs than there are working-age people, especially for ambitious young people. And there is a strong competition for them. Those companies that can offer a housing subsidy of 150,000 forints per month, in addition to salary, will have an easier time attracting good workers. There is also another major program package supporting small entrepreneurs, the Demian Sandor program, where we try to help small businesses step up and strengthen themselves. And we are attempting a capital allocation program that has never been seen before. That's why I say next year could be great, because we are introducing measures that have never been part of Hungarian economic policy. And I haven't even mentioned the workers' loans, which are probably the most emotionally significant for us in the government, as we will finally be able to help not just deserving students, but also young workers, giving them an opportunity to start a new life. As we say, work must be valued. We don't just say it in words. For young people, we provide tangible support, such as a 4 million forint one-time, interest-free loan to be repaid over 10 years, which can be written off in the case of children. They can then decide what to do with it.
You also mentioned earlier that the feasibility of next year's budget is linked to peace, and Donald Trump again stated at the recent event that one of the main goals of his administration will be achieving peace in the Russia-Ukraine war. We are now getting to know more members of his upcoming administration. How do you see the chances for peace now?
We are in a lull right now. The boat has been sailing with the wind behind it. The campaign itself has been a hurricane, and the boat of the peace supporters has been rapidly moving forward. Every day, the future American president said that there would be peace, peace, peace. And since there is no peace at the moment, and the opposition was pro-war, the American Democrats, the struggle between peace and war supporters was ongoing. We heard about it almost every day, and it felt like we were getting one step closer to peace every day. Now the peace-oriented presidential candidate has won, and we are waiting for peace. However, we are in a period of calm, because the new president will take office on January 20th. I see there is a debate in America, which is not my place to judge, but their constitutional system has this oddity where the president is elected in November and then takes office on January 20th. The question is, what happens between these two dates? Normally, this wouldn't be an exciting issue, but when the current U.S. government is pro-war and the president-elect is pro-peace, this question suddenly becomes interesting. Will the Americans accept the decision of the American people that the peace-oriented president won? So if there is democracy, fairness, equity, and honor, then the current government should not escalate its war actions or commitments. Instead, they should give the new peace-oriented president the opportunity to implement their program as smoothly as possible, since America has chosen this program. The person who was elected is also in a strange situation. They are not yet president. Taking action before officially becoming president is, according to Americans, a risky thing to do. And since Donald Trump is constantly being threatened with imprisonment, I think he will think 5 times about what he can and cannot do in this limbo period. This is why, suddenly, the powerful wind of the campaign has stopped, and our sailboat is stuck. The peace sailboat is stuck in the open sea, wondering what will happen next. So, we are facing a very difficult, exciting, and complicated 2 months. Our only task is not to solve America's problems. It is enough for us to understand them as they affect us. We must work on achieving change in Brussels, because even though our pro-peace ally has won in America, no change has yet occurred in Brussels, and that is our real task, as we are members of the European Union. So we must constantly push for a pro-peace shift in Brussels, so that the idea doesn't take root that we can continue this war without the Americans. There are supporters of this, and they need to be pushed back and forced into a meaningful dialogue, where they should explain how, without the Americans, we will support Ukraine without destroying our own economies. Because there isn't enough money in Europe to finance this war without America, that's for sure. So, Hungary must continue its fight for peace, now with Brussels as the venue, with the success of a great American expectation behind us. This is what the issue of peace looks like. Overall, I see it as possible, and within the logic of governmental responsibility, to submit a pro-peace budget despite the open war versus peace battle in Brussels.
It's also interesting, this European debate on the possible continued sole financing of the war, because yesterday, a fresh analysis was published on Portfolio, which indicated that if the EU were a U.S. state, it would be the third poorest. This really highlights the competitiveness problems as well. Just last week, EU heads of state and government held talks in Budapest, and under the Hungarian presidency, they agreed on a competitiveness pact. When and what results could we expect from this package?
I'll try to recall the exact numbers. About 10-15 years ago, the economic growth of the United States and Europe was on par, or moving ahead together. And if I look at the last 11 years or so, Europe's economy grew by about 15%, while America's grew by 65%, 15 versus 65. This means that the Americans have outpaced us. And I haven't even mentioned China and the emerging Asian economies, because they have rushed ahead at full speed, leaving Europe behind. Right now, I'm just talking about America. So they have left us behind. And since we belong to the same cultural circle and started from a similar level of development 11 or so years ago, we have to ask the question of what we are doing wrong. The Americans are doing something right, and this question must be answered. And therefore, someone is also responsible. After all, European economic policy is being directed by someone. There is a committee, and it has a president. There are 30,000 bureaucrats sitting there who I don't exactly know what they are doing, but it's certain that they're not doing the right thing, because otherwise we would have grown by 65%. So decisions are made there. Trade policy decisions, false regulations, decisions on sanctions, energy regulation issues, and questions on the green transition. These were obviously bad decisions, because if they hadn't been bad, we would have at least been on par with the Americans. So a very serious self-examination must be conducted by European institutions, because they clearly ruined the 5 to 10 years behind us. Hungary, however, has managed quite well. Hungarians who travel less to the west might not see as clearly as I do that we've managed quite well, because compared to other European countries, we've slowed down far less or fallen out of the growth rhythm. The wealthier countries than us, who are still richer, have had terrible years recently. If you talk to a German or a French person, a normal person with a family and their own home, and ask how the family's monthly budget looks and where they are spending, you will hear horrified people, opinions, and numbers. Because, of course, there is no utility price reduction there. And the increase in energy costs has eaten up a significant part of family budgets. Of course, they're still wealthier than us because they didn't have communism, and so on and so forth. They didn't have a planned economy. They didn't have the Soviet Union. They didn't have the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, CMEA, so they have a historical advantage. But in comparison to themselves, everyone is complaining there, and there are understandable reasons for this. So what I want to say in response to your question is that there is no time. That's exactly what we don't have. President Macron said that if the European Union doesn't change its strategy in a matter of moments, it will die in 2 to 3 years, and he used this exact phrase. This, coming from the French president, who is from Europe's second-largest economy, sounds more than alarming. I say that if we don't make certain decisions in the next 6 months, if we can't push through certain decisions in Brussels, then we cannot prevent what the French president is talking about, that in 2 to 3 years, we'll be signing off, closing shop. What needs to be done in the next 6 months? First and foremost, we need to reduce energy prices. There is no competition where the Americans are paying 4 times less for electricity and gas than the Europeans, and we somehow win. It's not possible. We can't win this way. Whatever we do, no matter how many tricks we pull out of the hat, or pull a rabbit from the hat, we can't compensate for this competitive disadvantage. We will lose. So we definitely need to lower energy prices. This means we need to review the sanctions, because under such a sanctions policy, energy prices will not decrease. It will be painful for those who supported the sanctions, but not for us, because we will experience this as a victory. However, the other side will have to change, or else they will ruin the European economy. It's not easy. We must admit that a mistake was made earlier, and we must return to a logic that was previously rejected. So, this is not a simple political battle, but we must keep pressuring them constantly. We need to declare an anti-bureaucratic revolution, because the second biggest problem in the Union is the amount of idiotic regulations, unrealistic, unworkable rules that are killing the economy. In the next 6 months, we must achieve these 2 results.
What are the chances of this happening? Because we are familiar with how the EU bureaucracy works, and it usually takes a long time for a piece of legislation or plan to reach the stage of practical implementation. It tends to take a longer time for everything.
30%, I think the chance is 30%. That's why it's very important that we don't wait for Brussels. I'm in favor of rebellion. We need to rebel. Wherever Brussels tries to impose something on us that is bad for Hungarian families, we simply have to resist and rebel, and not secretly or in a sneaky way, but openly and directly, just as we did with the migration issue. Our budget is an open rebellion. It includes utility price reductions. We're launching housing support programs and support programs for small businesses. If I remember correctly, in 2025, more than 300 new investments will begin. That's over 8 trillion forints of investment. We will also pay out 480 billion forints of that next year. So this year and the next, about 500 investments will be completed. We're starting huge railway investments, highway repairs, and new constructions. We are even building a university, and perhaps we'll finally be able to complete the Hindpal Children's Hospital. So, serious big things are being launched, which are in direct contrast. By the way, to look at this politically from last week's summit, many expected that it would serve as a kind of protest forum for those who disagree with Hungarian government policies.
There were those who hinted that they wouldn't even show up. In contrast, we witnessed a unity among the EU institutions and the leaders of the member states that hasn't been seen in a long time. What could be the reason for this?
The reason is Mario Draghi. So, I would gladly take credit for this achievement, for creating some kind of agreement, even if it only lasted for 2 days. But that's not the case. Hungary did contribute, but we didn't play the decisive role in this. The key factor was that the former president of the European Central Bank prepared a study for a Brussels audience about how the European economy is doing, and he presented it here in Budapest to the heads of governments and states. And it was so overwhelming, so staggering, that it leaves you speechless when you read it. What here, for some reason, the liberal press continuously tries to portray as a civilizational struggle. We shouldn't say that things are going badly in the West, because it is seen as an ideological issue, a view shared by a significant portion of Hungarian opinion shapers. If someone talks about the decline of the Western economy, in that moment, they are immediately labeled as some Eastern dictator. Therefore, there is no meaningful dialogue about this issue in Hungary. But as President Draghi described it, it's not just a decline, it's a crash. Europe is on a path that is equivalent to suicide. And this was so shocking to the European leaders because, although they usually speak about these matters in their own language, I always say that the language of Brussels politics is akin to the language of the French royal courts from the Middle Ages, where every courtier competed to say the most beautiful and flattering things about the king. That's how Brussels is structured today. We meet, and the competition, of course, we Hungarians are excluded from this because it doesn't sit well with us, but the others compete to come up with the softest, silkiest, most melodic songs about European unity, European values, and European institutions like modern-day courtiers, instead of facing the real problems. But here in Budapest, there wasn't any opportunity for that, not because of me or Hungary, but because of President Draghi, who put this paper on the table, which included around 70 tables and annexes with it. This is the situation. I think this created the atmosphere, the moment when everyone agreed that if this is indeed the situation, and it is being stated by Mario Draghi, a respected former central bank governor within the EU, then it must be taken seriously. Decisions need to be made, and the path to implementing them must be started. This is how the Budapest Consensus and the Budapest Declaration on Competitiveness were formed, which we unexpectedly managed to get approved by all member states without issue.
We have more time, but let's touch on another topic. There is currently a national consultation underway regarding the new economic policy. You said that its essence is to strengthen the government on important issues. At the same time, you also mentioned that on crucial matters, we are no longer alone. America is with us. If America is with us, why is the consultation still necessary?
Consultations always have two purposes. One is that you need ammunition for the battles in Brussels. Of course, it's not war over there, but political battles. So we don't fight with bullets, machine guns, or rocket launchers, but with political arguments. In a democracy, the strongest political argument is the will of the people. If you have that, you can fight. If you don't, it's more than risky. The other purpose of the consultation is to encourage those who are willing to think about Hungary's future. Out of 10 million people, not everyone is willing to do this. It's not their habit. They live differently. They don't have the time, or they have more important things to do. We know how everyday life works, but there are always about 1 to 1.5 million people who, if the government asks them to spend a few minutes thinking about Hungary's future and provide some questions to help inspire this thinking, are willing to engage. Moreover, they are open to sharing their opinions. If someone is willing to do this, they will surely talk to others, and perhaps even in groups. This creates an opportunity for several million people to exchange at least a few words about matters concerning our common future. In this sense, the national consultation is suitable for communalizing political dilemmas and the major questions about the country's future. That's why it's worth distributing everywhere, and that's why I ask everyone to fill it out. Take a few minutes to share your thoughts, and then spend a few minutes talking to others about what you think. Perhaps others will also have ideas, and this way, the country will grow stronger emotionally, intellectually, and politically, and it will also become more united.
I asked Prime Minister Viktor Orbán about next year's budget, the prospects for peace, and the results of last week's EU summit.